Throughout the Second World War, there were a number of countries who collaborated with the Nazis and the Third Reich. One country that fought alongside the German army and joined the Axis powers was Hungary, and they waged war against the Soviet Union. Following the Nazi occupation of Hungary in March 1944, the Arrow Cross Party, a far-right ultranationalist party, came into power and formed a government known as the Government of National Unity. They were in power for a short time, but during this, 15,000 civilians were executed and murdered, and 80,000 people were deported to concentration camps. The leader of this party was Ferenc Szalasi, who after the war was sentenced to death for his war crimes. Join us today as we look at the brutal execution of Ferenc Szalasi, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Ferenc Szalasi was born in January 1897, and he believed that he was given power to rule from God through his mother's milk. He lived with his mother right until 1944, and he followed his father's footsteps and joined the army as a young man. He finished his studies and then went to a military academy. He finished this and then was promoted to the rank of lieutenant in 1915, and he became an officer serving in the Austro-Hungarian army during the First World War. He was on the front lines for 3 years and was based on the Italian front before he was sent to Verdun in the final days of the conflict. Following the political struggles in Hungary after the war, Szalasi was apolitical, and he was not involved in political events post-war in Hungary. He continued to train inside of the military, and he enrolled in the General Staff Officers Training at other military academies. He was seen as an outstanding officer, and it's considered that he was popular and a beloved member of the military. His fellow officers saw him as very intelligent and a very skilled commander, but others believed he was too powerful. He continued to succeed in the military and achieved the rank of a major. When Gyula Gumbos became the Prime Minister of Hungary around 1932, Szalasi became more involved in politics, and he then became obsessed with it. He was considered a fanatical right-wing nationalist who believed that Hungary should expand its borders back to former levels. It had previously had its lands reduced by around 72%, and he then wrote a pamphlet and sent it to other politicians, but because he was a soldier, he was banned from being involved in politics, and was sentenced to 20 days imprisonment, and was then expelled from the General Staff. Following his release, he then served as a staff officer, but then was disillusioned with the army, and he decided to give his time to politics. He first made the Party of National Will, a nationalistic party, and this was later banned for being too radical. But then Szalasi set up the Hungarian National Socialist Party in 1937, but this was also banned, but he did gather support from lower classes and workers. This party was anti-Semitic, but following the German Anschluss of Austria, Szalasi's followers became more radical, and he himself was arrested and imprisoned. But he was then proclaimed the National Socialist Arrow Party leader, which was a coalition of several right-wing groups, and this attracted a large number of people to it. It gained 30 seats in power, and then became eventually one of the biggest parties in Hungary. But when the Second World War broke out, the Arrow Cross Party was banned, and Szalasi was forced to work underground, and he did gain the backing of the Germans. But in March 1944, the Nazis occupied Hungary. Hitler launched Operation Marguerite, and in this, his soldiers were told to occupy the country, and with this he instilled the pro-German Derm Szotzsé as the Prime Minister of Hungary. But the key thing for Szalasi was that the Arrow Cross Party was then legalised, and he was then able to attract more members to the party. But when the Prime Minister was quickly deposed, Szalasi then became an enemy of the Hungarian government, and the regent ordered his arrest. But the Germans in Szalasi had a perfect ally, and the Hungarian regent began to plan to come to peace with the Soviets and end Hungary's involvement in the Axis alliance. But the Germans then kidnapped his son and threatened to kill him unless the regent abdicated and put Ferenc Szalasi in power. A document was signed naming Szalasi as the Prime Minister, and this made the Arrow Cross Party partially in power. He was then placed as the head of the state, and then his government changed the Kingdom of Hungary into a puppet state of Nazi Germany. The Council of Regency was established and approved, and on the 4th of November 1944, Szalasi was made the leader of the nation, and he was joined in power by 16 ministers, half who belonged to his Arrow Cross Party. But whilst in power, he had very few other plans but to carry out the policies which pleased the Nazis. He executed the Nazi Party's beliefs and ideology, and he did this to please Hitler and to stop the Germans being a threat. Along with the Nazis, Szalasi's government recommended the deportation of the Jews, which had been paused. His government promoted martial law, and they carried out large-scale executions of those who were considered possible enemies of Szalasi and his party. He also deported thousands of Jews, and many were executed and killed inside of the gas chambers, and despite not being in power for long, in particular 163 days, he had a devastating and deadly effect. He also sent large amounts of Hungarian produce and resources to Germany to help with their war effort, and he forced young and old men into the last remnants of the Hungarian army, being forced to fight the Soviet war machine of the Red Army. When he took control of the country, the Red Army were inside of Hungary, and his authority was rather limited, but his party did deport 80,000 people to the concentration camps. But on the 19th of November 1944, he had nowhere to go, as he was inside Budapest as it was encircled by the Soviet Red Army, and also the Romanian army, as they surrounded the city. This resulted in a 102-day siege of Budapest, but as it took hold, he managed to escape and flee. He fled to a city in the west of Hungary, then carried on to Vienna in March 1945, and then he went to Munich. But as Hungary capitulated and fell to the Soviets, the cabinet of the Arrow Cross Party had fled the lands, and it was dissolved on the 7th of May 1945, a day before Germany surrendered. But on the 6th of May, the day before, Ferenc Szalasi was captured by the Americans, and months later was repatriated back to Hungary. The Hungarians then tried him by the People's Tribunal in Budapest, and many open sessions took place where war criminals were sentenced to death and were executed for high treason. Ferenc Szalasi was placed on trial for high treason, but also war crimes, and he was deemed guilty of deporting thousands of his own people to their deaths in concentration camps. He was virtually hated by the Hungarian people, and on the 12th of March 1946, he was brought to Budapest in a town square, where he was to be executed. Along with two of his former ministers and a party theologist, the group of the Arrow Cross members were then led to where a number of large posts had been placed. The method of execution for Ferenc Szalasi was hanging using the Austrian pole method, and a few large posts had been set up, with a rope attached to a hook at the top. Szalasi was taken up to the scaffold, and he was then flanked by guards, and members of the public watched on. He was placed with his back to the post, and his arms and legs were tied up, so he could not move. Then the noose was placed around his neck, and the rope was then tightened, before the executioner took the steps from underneath him. He had been given the last rites before, but the post only left a couple of feet between the hanging man and the ground, and this method of execution in particular led to him slowly strangling to death, rather than having his neck snapped. He struggled and strangled, but then he succumbed to his death shortly after, whilst the public looked on. He was then buried in the new public cemetery in Budapest, but Ferenc Szalasi was considered a serious war criminal inside of Hungary, despite only being in office and power from the 16th of October 1944 to the 28th of March 1945. Despite initially being a military officer, he entered politics and crafted his right-wing ideas. But Szalasi became a man whose party were involved in collaborating with the Nazis in their politics and beliefs, which resulted in the mass murder and brutality of people and their deaths inside of the concentration camps. But he was executed in front of a huge crowd in Budapest. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.